I mean, you have to think at the point before I started building out my team, I was roughly managing around 500 companies on my own.
Once again, welcome to the Digital Customer Experience Podcast with me, Alex Turkovich. So glad you could join us here today and every week as we explore how digital can help enhance the customer and employee experience. My goal is to share what my guests and I have learned over the years so that you can get the insights that you need to evolve your own digital programs. If you'd like more info, need to get in touch, or sign up for the weekly companion newsletter that has additional articles and resources in it, go to digitalcustomersuccess.com. For now, let's get started. Greetings and welcome back to episode 74 of the Digital CX podcast. My name is Alex Turkovich. So glad you could be here this week and every week as we talk about digital in CX. Today's guest is none other than Joe Grande, who is VP of Customer Success at Business Insider and also founder of a consultancy called Joe Does TechTouch. Funny story about how he got the name Joe Does TechTouch, but I think you can probably figure it out. Joe has been involved in TechTouch since it was called TechTouch, and now it's called Digital. So we talk at length about his approach to things, how he advises people on their digital strategy, what his own strategies look like around automation and data and those kinds of things. So it's a really, again, insightful conversation into somebody who's an operator who knows the ins and outs of what it's like to build and run a digital program. So I really hope you enjoy my conversation with Joe, because I sure did. Joe, it's so awesome to have you on the podcast. We've rescheduled a couple times, my fault. So Thanks for dealing with it, but I'm super stoked to have you on.
No, thanks for having me. And life happens, what are you going to do? That's it.
It tends to, yeah. Sometimes I wish it didn't, but it tends to.
That's how it goes.
Yeah, for sure.
Cool.
We have a connection that we discovered. I don't know, how did we discover this anyway? I don't remember.
I don't remember either. I mean, it's my brother-in-law.
Yep.
My brother-in-law, Matt. And I think you just saw a mutual connection. And I think we were both in, TechTouch, Digital CS, or automation.
Yeah.
I think that's what it was. It was, my title.
Something like that.
Yeah, exactly.
And then I saw you were connected to Grande, which I will forever call him Grande, who was my college not college roommate, but he and I went to college together. We practically college roommates, because I think I lived in an apartment on like the 5th floor of our apartment building, and he was like on the 2nd floor or something like that. So we were always basically hanging out with the group. So that's cool.
No, anyway, awesome. Small world.
It's a very small world. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So he's your brother-in-law, and he still hasn't reached out. Yeah, I still haven't talked to him recently. So like, we gotta like fix that situation.
For sure.
But yeah, you're currently leading, I guess, automations. And what are you currently doing?
Yeah.
Stop putting your words in your mouth.
No, for sure. So I'm Joe Grande. I'm the founder of Joe Does TechTouch. I have a lot of background. I could go on my origin and all that kind of stuff, how I got into it. But
for sure.
Long story short, I help companies with their TechTouch or digital CS strategy, essentially going to market. Just based on my experience, it's roughly, I would say we're coming on 10 years, if not longer. And given that, I kind of know like what bases to hit before you get things going. A lot of companies and leaders, when I talk to them, they just don't know where to start. Sometimes they don't understand that it's all based on data, or at least that's a big proponent of it. And then of course the technology, the strategy piece of it, and then helping them once we figure out all those different essentially bottlenecks or areas for opportunity, how do we implement, make those changes, and then, hit the ground running.
For sure.
Yeah.
How'd you wind your way into this line of work?
So I've always been a worker. Like I always like fixing stuff just like personally on my own. And I've always kind of been like actually email marketing and just marketing in general. It's kind of where I went to college for. And I worked at a company eventually at eMarketer. It was a research company, SaaS, and essentially I was in account management. So account management, as it's known now, pretty much as CS, kind of working up the ranks, onboarding CS to account manager, kind of the entire account lifecycle. Starting that job was a great opportunity for me because I got to see all the different pieces of how to manage an account post sales. Mm-hmm. And then what was something that was more unique to me because I always was just a grinder, I was a hustler. They saw me as like the guinea pig. And I was like, hey, you could work on, we had like 2 different segments of accounts, unlimited or enterprise accounts, and then like individual seat accounts. Yeah. And it's like, hey, you're going to manage both. I'm like, all right, yeah, let's do it. And that was pretty much it. And what came of that though, is it forced me to be like, hey, how do I manage these at scale? And it was just a more of an inherent thing for myself. So I would find like free tools. Like there was one Outlook add-on called like Easy Mail Merge or something along those lines. Any way to communicate with these users and points of contact. Lo and behold, our strategy changed as an organization where we're focusing on SMB, long tail, right? So it's kind of a familiar story when we associate TechTouch. From there, they said, hey, we need to manage these subscriptions. We think you're the perfect fit for the role.
Yeah.
Start to launch this program. And that's when we started to look at like, hey, what does our tech stack look like? What can we use to implement this? Started out at about 60 customers, like accounts, and then it blew up to, by the time I left, about 700 plus companies. And then that's in addition to managing and building out that team, increasing NRR, all that good stuff. But it was fun, to say the least. It was fun to build.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
And then, you've also been obviously working with other clients of yours via Joe Does TechTouch, which is a great name.
Yeah.
Because that's, you were telling me like when we were chatting a couple months ago, you were like, yeah, Joe Does TechTouch. Like that's what people just always said to you, right?
I was in the office. I was closing. We were using Salesforce. We're closing Salesforce ops all the time. And people would ask like, who's this? I think we had, I forget what it was. I think it was like a PDF, like weekly newsletter that went out. It was like all the deals for TechTouch. Like, who's this guy, Joe? He's like, oh, Joe's the guy that does TechTouch.
Yeah, Joe Does TechTouch.
Thought it was fitting.
Yeah, that's super cool. So given that Joe Does TechTouch, would love to get kind of your insight. As you know, I ask all my guests about, their kind of own definition of digital CS, which is curated on the website and stuff. But what would you say to somebody who you just met in terms of like, what is digital CS and what it is that we do here?
100%. Yeah. So I think you could even break it down to 2 different buckets now when there's TechTouch and digital CS, but like, as a whole, like if we're talking about digital CS and TechTouch, as collectively, I view it as the strategy of managing customers at scale first, and then it's by doing so, the execution piece of it is using that technology, the data, in order to personalize that communication. That communication could be email, on site, and then also in the use of like a knowledge base. You're still communicating with your customers and informing them, and it's also, a lot of people go back and forth between proactive and reactive. I believe it's both proactive and reactive.
Absolutely.
The right data for sure.
That's, spot on, right? Yeah. A lot of people are like, oh, we're too reactive, and then they go guardrail to guardrail or whatever. But it's like that balance, because you want to be reactive. Like when stuff goes sour, you want to know about it, and you want to, maybe you're stepping in a little bit late, but the proactive element of it comes in is to like, try to avoid those situations at all costs and get ahead of those things.
Yeah, no, definitely, for sure.
Yeah, that's cool. I dig it. And I especially like your kind of statement that it's a strategy and not a segment, right? Like, that's the whole thing, right? I mean, no matter which customer it is, they can benefit from it, whether they have an account manager or a CSM or not.
Yeah, no, 100%.
Yeah. So you and I've, discussed, I think you're incredibly passionate about just automations and getting in there and making stuff work and, sticking stuff together in ways that it maybe wasn't designed to do cool stuff. Are there some, I would love to just get right into the weeds of some of the stuff that you've done and some of the wacky kind of combinations of tools and automations that you've built that are really cool.
Yeah, no, it's funny. I've been thinking about this for a while, like all the Scrappy stuff. I kind of take notes too, because sometimes you could forget, but they are useful in the future. I think something that is underutilized, no matter what the solution is, obviously it depends on how each of the solutions work, but like canned responses, snippets, templates, it's something that helped me in my career personally. And then I've, of course, like worked with my clients was, hey, what's repeatable? What takes what takes not that much brain power, and then what's you could send to your customers.
Yeah.
But the point of like the snippets and templates where you take it to the next level is like, hey, at least if it's set up in this fashion, what data can I pull from those templates? So for example, I was using SalesLoft at the time. So sales engagement platform, and it was connected to our Salesforce instance. I would go and just from the sheer, not even using like an in-app, like now you have Salesforce and HubSpot has like in-app solutions and Gmail where you pull all your account information. Right. I had a scrappy way at the time early on where it was like, all right, I need to know my account details. When are they going to renew? How much are they paying? What's their health score? And I would just go into the Gmail before reaching out to my POC and then bring it in. And that way I'm kept on one screen. I mean, you have to think at the point before I started building out my team, I was roughly managing around 500 companies on my own. So I had to be quick on my feet to figure out, hey, all right, how do I, and I have, of course, like automated those renewal touch points, which you could talk about, and of course the onboarding and things of that nature. But in the beginning, we had to test out a few, use more of that, like, again, that SalesLoft or even Gainsight or Turn Zero process where it kind of queues it up, just to see what was working first before we fully automated the appropriate touch points. But I think it's a big one. I think it's a big one that's not utilized, and it's simple too. I think a lot of people overthink automation. That's something where automation's happening behind the scenes and just bring in the data.
I think a lot of people have like automation capabilities and don't even know about it.
Totally. Oh my gosh. It's crazy. It's crazy to think there's so many free solutions out there too. I mean, Zapier being one of them.
Sure.
And you could easily whip something together and you could do some damage. You could do some fun stuff with it and make your life a hell of a lot easier.
So I've been playing with Make.com a lot. Do you know about Make?
I have not heard of it. No.
It's basically a Zapier competitor.
Okay.
But they have in my experience anyway, a much cleaner like integration into AI. Like you can integrate into Perplexity or you can integrate into ChatGPT in interesting and meaningful ways. It's definitely not as user friendly.
Sure.
I would not recommend it to the lay person. But it's, it's all those, like the other day I built this bot that on a weekly basis sends me like news digests of digital CS stuff that's been happening,
Nice.
and it'll scrape Perplexity and pull it all into a Google Doc that it sends to me and all that kind of stuff. But it's like before those kinds of things would have taken me like hours and hours, and it's just like Googling and stupid. In fact, I hate Google these days. Like, I can't even look at it anymore.
It's so true. I actually my first spot is always ChatGPT now. I think I pretty much I'm like 75% ChatGPT, 25 Google. Depending on what I'm looking for. It's just more efficient.
It's way more efficient, and you don't get a bunch of links to stuff that may or may not be relevant, and you don't get like advertisements, and you don't get all this noise that Google. I think Google's trying, but it's like it's not there. Like,
no, it's not there yet. No way,
it's not there.
It's funny. I was thinking of another. I just dawned on me, and another like Scrappy, way of automation too. It's also pretty. Well, I think pretty simple. I think it depends on your org. And I just don't want it to run away from me. But deal stages are sediment. Something that I thought was always pretty useful was basing like automation off of those different stages. So, for example, like at the basic level, right? Let's say you have a company where you have an open op, right? It's 50-50 probability.
Yeah.
You have likely where it's on the higher end, right? Probably 80 to 90%. Close won, close loss. You have unlikely, right? We'll keep it at that. You could launch certain campaigns off of those different stages based on, you have your rep updating it, right? So if they have a, not so great conversation with their POC, okay, they might be at risk or unlikely. Great. Well, we should be potentially firing off either more campaigns to users, whether it's maybe to get user feedback, whether to let them know like, hey, their account is at risk of expiring depending on certain timeframes. It's something that I've used quite a bit. It's been pretty useful in the sense of like, hey, you have a little bit of control, I guess you could say, when it comes to the automation. Because I know a lot of people fear that. It's like, hey, something's running in the background. I'm having a great conversation. I want something to fire off, inadvertently, like messing up the relationship. Well, that has a better way of like navigating it.
Yeah.
So
I mean, that's an interesting, to me, where my brain goes with that is, we are basically marketers, and that control that you were talking about with regards to those flows is so critical, because just firing stuff off, great, it's awesome to have the ability to do that, but is it effective? Does it represent your brand? Is it the tone that you want? Is the tone like regionally applicable?
Yep.
Like all those little variables that go into it, really, you need the technical brain to build all that fun wacky stuff, but then you need like the marketer kind of emotional intelligence type person to really help make it look good and make it effective.
100%. Yeah, I think a lot of people forget that it is marketing, especially on the automation piece. Like, and I think I've heard this in a number of conversations. I said it myself. It's like, it's not to downplay it, but it's like we've been doing this. Companies have been doing this for a long time, especially B2C. I mean, if you have the data, you're able to fire it off. The one thing I would add to it, though, when it comes down to, especially like on the comms piece of like actual content of the communication, it's still sales. I'm a big believer in still sales. Marketing, obviously, it's great, right? We are marketers, we're selling the product, but I feel like on that sales piece of it, right, or now potentially post-sales CS, it adds that element of like humanizing it, right, and that content, and then obviously, you kind of take it from there. But yeah, I think it's a lot of people got to remember too, and work with their marketing teams too. I think that's something a lot of people forget when they're starting this, and I think it's almost like the first place they should be looking.
Right.
Yeah.
And it can be it can be super hard to do that too, because the marketing team is like, they own certain elements of that, and it can be, if you're not, if you don't have a good relationship, it can be like seen as, oh, they're coming in and trying to take over and whatever, and it's like, peace. Like, you do your thing. We're just doing this thing, so it sounds the same as what you're doing.
Yeah, no, for sure. Oh, cross-functional relationships. It's work.
It is work. And I think it is more work than a lot of folks who get into digital really anticipate, because I mean, in CS, you have to, talking about enterprise, like high touch CS, absolutely. You have to deal with that kind of stuff and, advocacy and those kinds of things. But when it comes to like these campaigns, because we're essentially running marketing campaigns, right? So it's
100%.
It's like it gets trickier for sure.
Definitely.
One of the things that you and I talked about, in prepping for the show was just the general concept around like data and how you can't do any of this without like some semblance of clean data. I think I would say that I'm guessing that a lot of what you work with your clients on is like, do you have the foundational data that you need to go like run some of these motions and do some of these campaigns and things like that. So, and I'm curious, what would you kind of prescribe to a company who wants to get into, a lot more digital stuff, but maybe has some data hygiene issues? Like what approaches do you like to take?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. And I would say at my best guess, 80% of companies don't have it together, and that's okay. I think the biggest piece is taking a step back and, right, it's not about the tech. It is, but it's not primary. It's not the primary focus. It's like, all right, what's the strategy and what's the problem I'm starting, trying to solve? Just like a business. It's like, okay, what's taking the most time, right? So let's say it is maybe, in my opinion, I think renewals could easily be automated, but typically what I see industry standard, at a minimum, you should be doing like welcome emails, onboarding. Something should be happening there, and you should be communicating your customers as soon as they register, as soon as they come on board. Right. But let's say it's either of those. You have to take a look at, and there's two different buckets of how data is being potentially updated. Right. So you have to get an understanding of it. And first it's like, okay, do I have a process in place with my team? Right. So what does that process look like? Okay. Is there like an account transfer process from new business to account management or customer success? That's number one. If there isn't, okay, well, maybe we should start there and working with sales, just creating that foundation, right? And when I say that information should be like, all right, who's your point of contact, right? They're going to be the first person to tell you, hey, this person's the decision maker, and this person maybe's been going to spearhead, if it's a technical solution, spearhead the implementation. Yeah. Great, fantastic. Now you just saved a ton of work. Now you're obviously going to potentially save that within Salesforce or HubSpot, or you name your CSP, and then create a process around that. The second piece of data is going to be, hey, what information is being updated, if at all, on the back end? So that's going to be like usage data, right? Something you have no control over and should be automatically updating on its own. When's the last time someone's registered? You're sophisticated enough to identify who's a power user, who's not a power user, right? Just, opposites from there. But the point is, get an understanding of how your data works first, and then go with the problem first, understanding what the data is, and start with one problem. Yeah. Time is also your best friend. I think a lot of people underestimate the importance of time. What do I mean by that? When did they renew? All right, you have 365 days. Work your way down from there. You don't have to go crazy in a sense of like, health score right away. You can just be very time bound and just get a lot of like work off of a CSM's back, or just, in order for them to focus on more strategic conversations, just get comms out. And then of course there's the other piece of it, right? Because it's not just email. It's also like, hey, do we have instructions for people, for end users to know how to use the solution? That stuff should be happening anyway. At a startup, maybe not so much if they're very, very, in the beginning stages. But yeah, I would say to start there is really understanding the data first. How you can also audit, a good way is running like Salesforce reports, CSP reports, whatever it is, just to see if there's any gaps, right? Yeah. Like, hey, if I need to know the contract end dates or my POCs, not every account has them. Okay, great. How trustworthy am I to launch some said campaign on it? That's how you're going to start. It's not to get, the main thing is not to fall stagnant and just be like, oh no, I can't do any of this. Sure. Small buckets, small pieces of the pie. Yeah.
Hey, I want to have a brief chat with you about this show. Did you know that roughly 60% of listeners aren't actually subscribed to the show on whatever platform they're listening to it on? Now, as you know, algorithms love likes, follows, subscribes, comments, all of that kind of stuff. So if you get value out of the content, you listen regularly, and you want to help others to discover the content as well, please go ahead and follow the show, leave a comment, leave a review. Anything that you want to do there really helps us to grow organically as a show. And while you're at it, go sign up for the companion newsletter that goes out every week at digitalcustomersuccess.com. Now, back to the show. I think that's so smart. I was recently chatting with Percy Rose. I don't know if you know him.
Yeah.
And he was a very good guy. Yeah. And he was talking about how basically they had the CSP ripped out from under them at HPE. And he's actually seen it as a blessing in disguise, because what it's forced them to do is to go look at the source data and really interact with that data. And as they're doing various things in digital, they're going through and systematically, one by one, kind of cleaning some of it up, and that's going to serve them so well when it comes time to putting in a new CSP and totally. Really getting the systems stood up. Because how many times have you talked to somebody that says, we've got the CSP, but I don't trust my data, or I don't trust the data. I don't trust the data. Totally. Everybody doesn't trust the data, but if you've been in the weeds in the data, maybe you do.
For sure. No, I think it's so funny too. It goes back to, I have conversations with people, and it's crazy to think that it still happens today, especially where the economy's going, especially for tech companies, but where they think of tech first, data second. Totally. They don't understand, like, hey, like, are you even ready to take on like a CSP or sales engagement platform, whatever it might be? And that's awesome to hear that they're thinking that way. I mean, Percy's a great guy, so I'm sure he's leading a proper charge there. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the tool really doesn't matter. I mean, the tool doesn't matter, period. Like, sure, some are going to be better than others. Some are going to do what you want them more than the other. But the trick is, you got to have the data to support it. But I think more fundamentally, and you alluded to this earlier, is like, what are you trying to do? Like, let's let's be like crystal clear on what your program objectives and outcomes are, because once you've nailed that, the rest kind of comes naturally.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah. Are there some cool like digital things that you've seen that you like to nerd over? Like I interact with certain companies here and there that just have like really cool digital motions, and I'd be like, "Oh, wow, how they?" I want to like know more,
Yeah.
in terms of like how they built it and stuff like that. Is there anything like that you've come across recently?
Yeah, it's interesting. I've seen also like the transition of certain from surprising companies actually when it comes to digital. I could give an example there. This was actually from a personal standpoint.
Uh-huh.
So Google, I mean, crazy to think that a company at one point had tech support as large as they are on the phone. So I swear, I wish I could make this up. So it's always a challenge to say the less, even for me, given my background and email automation and so on, but like setting up DNS records, it always runs away from me. It's, you gotta take the time, or otherwise you're going to get caught up in spam folders. It's not going to end well. You got to do the work. But a while back I was working with a rep at Google. I'm like, get out of here. This guy's calling me. I'm like, I was going online and it just like gave me a phone call. Now they don't offer that. And I was like, well, that makes sense because they're so large. I mean, I didn't know how they managed it at the time. Yeah. But now how Google, I wish I had a concrete way of explaining this, but essentially when setting it up, because I was using Gmail as my email client, and then obviously for hosting the domain, but it doesn't matter. Point is, it was linking to the appropriate pages, every setting, right down to every item. And I was able to do it like that versus I was on a 30-minute phone call with a guy a couple of years ago, and it was just far less efficient. Now it just gave me step by step, just sent me to the right page, sent me to the right article, and I was done in less than 15 minutes. I did DNS, DMARCs, SPF, the whole 9 yards. So that was a pretty good example. I think a lot of B2C companies have always been doing it well, and I think there's opportunity in B2B. I think one recently I stumbled upon was Blinkist. It's like, I don't know if you've ever heard of it. It's kind of a summary of books for kind of your modern day Spark Notes. And, maybe I'm dating myself, but
totally.
But basically it summarizes the book. It also does audio, but it picks up what obviously I gave my interest, but it picks up what I'm listening to more and then push me the right content and so on. I think there's a lot of even marketing solutions that are doing this now. I know Iterable's doing it. I'm sure a couple of others. And there's a ton of opportunity there, but you could use that, of course, within digital CS, TechTouch, depending on what your product is, of course. But
I had an interesting experience just today with the host of the website. So I used what do I use to host a website? It's WordPress on Namecheap or something like that, and I had to renew my SSL certificate so that got to keep it safe. And I had my DNS records wrong in there or whatever. And so I used the chatbot in there fully expecting to get a person, but in fact I got a robot, and the robot said, your DNS record's wrong, so you need to fix it to this. And I was like, wow, cool. Robot just did what a human, what a human could do in a lot less time. Like the human would probably take 15 minutes to go search and figure it out, whereas this robot did it really quickly. That obviously gets us into dangerous territory where it's like, robots are replacing humans, and I always maintain that like this kind of stuff is here to help the human, whether it's the human the customer, the human, or whether it's the employee, because now it hopefully helps that company to like focus their employees on having like value add conversations instead of just like looking at DNS records for a broken SSL certificate.
No, definitely. I'm 100% on board with that. I think that's definitely, you're on the money when it comes to how to reframe it, because I think a lot of people do get, worried, especially right now, given the climate, but at the end of the day, it's going to give more time back. I mean, at the time when I was, building out that big program, I mean, it technically replaced the headcount of, not replaced, but like it freed up the headcount of around 8 people, that it would typically take to manage that scale of a book, But it's also too, it kind of goes back to, and this is with just any sort of, whether it's technology or any sort of like, innovation, right? It's like you ever see pictures of the meme of like where it's like, oh, people are glued to their phones or their computer, and then it shows a picture back on the train and call it the 1960s or 50s, and everyone's reading a newspaper. I mean, it's it's evolution. It's just how it goes, and people are going to, they're going to gear to, like, I think a lot of people also have that sentiment about right now with AI, people worry about people becoming complacent, but at the end of the day, you're going to be able to do more and focus on areas that you have your strengths on. And then, all right, I don't know, for example, like not so great on setting up DNS records,
right.
ChatGPT send me in the right direction,
Can totally do it. Yeah. It's interesting too, because I think the one thing where people should be worried is if they're not actively using things like ChatGPT or Perplexity on a daily basis or weekly basis, let's call it that. Because, while you may be struggling with ways to implement it into your day-to-day,
right,
the skill set of using these tools is one that is going to become durable, because that shit's not going anywhere. And so I think those that are comfortable with AI tooling versus those that aren't are going to be better positioned in the job economy.
Yeah, 100% agree.
Yeah. I sometimes like to ask if there's any things that you've learned from blunders that you've made or others have made where you've been like, oh my God, that was stupid.
I mean, I've had my fair share. I think this is dating real back.
Okay, cool. Let's go.
Now. Yeah, this is a good one.
I'm 43. Let's go.
Yeah. So going back to the days of using like easy mail merge, it still exists today, by the way. You Google it, it's a plugin. I don't recommend it anymore. I mean, not to personally, that's my opinion, but just given understanding it now how email works, getting caught up in spam, so on and so forth. But the point is, I was using that technology a while back, emailing customers, and it's the point of understanding the tech, but also the data and making sure it's clean.
Yeah,
I don't know how it happens still to this day, but I emailed a large account. And for some reason, caught up in that account was the CEO's wife. And thankfully, it was just like, hey, register for, your access. Your company has enterprise. And she responded. But I mean, it was all good fun. It could have went sour quick. And I was also very junior, my role is Scrappy.
Right.
But it's, you got to be careful. But I think it's being careful, but also too, I think it's also being self-aware that things can happen, especially when you're launching automation. I think a lot of companies forget that. It's like, hey, there's a risk involved no matter what. But yeah, that was quite the blunder.
Yeah.
At least in my eyes.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. I mean, we've all seen fun things where you're sending stuff to the wrong contact. Maybe you're accidentally spamming the entire company. It's just, I mean, that's the dangers of email marketing, which is, I think, yet another reason why, user-based reach outs in product are so much better and cleaner. But yeah, man, it's a wild world out there.
No, it is. No, for sure. And what's crazy about it is that you try to keep up and there's always something new. I feel like every time I pop up online, which is great. I mean, I stumbled upon actually the other day one, I always use this in the past. It's called, I think it's called, unless they rebranded. It's been a while since I used it, but tango.us or us. It's like an app where it tracks your steps to create documentation. Yeah, but there's a recent one that I spoke to the CEO about the product. It's pretty cool. It's a startup called Reveal Automation. And it's a product where, the biggest challenge when creating your knowledge base is okay, you went through all that effort and time. What happens when product makes a change? Oh, you got to update the screenshots. Oh, you have to update the video. So how the product works in a nutshell, from what I understood, was that it's tracking the code. It'll track your steps similar to that other app that I mentioned. But when you make the changes to your product, the documentation and all those steps, whether it's an in-product walkthrough, whether it's a doc, whether it's a video, automatically updates. I saw live demos. It's crazy. I mean, no matter what, there's something out there, still. to figure out another problem.
That's so cool. I love that. And I love those practical applications. There's another company I'm trying to pull up. I can't remember the name of it. If I remember the name, I'll put it in the show notes. But it is an app that similarly deals with knowledge base articles, but it crawls tickets.
Yep.
And
that's powerful,
it'll basically update knowledge base articles and also suggest new articles and write them based on like support ticket volume. And I'm just like, as a manager of a knowledge base, like how many times have you been sent like, oh, this article's out of date or blah, 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 blah. It's like,
totally.
Again, it's that proactive versus reactive thing. Like if you can use that kind of shit to get like really proactive about stuff, it's huge.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah. What's Joe Grande paying attention to? What's in your content diet?
Content diet. Outside of this, honestly, like I do listen to your podcast pretty often. It's funny. Just recently, I opened a couple articles. It's kind of random, but not really. Zapier's newsletter, really good.
Oh yeah,
I like their newsletter. I kind of post their articles here and there. I think again, just given the fact of scrappiness, I think you could do a lot with it, especially with like AI. Something else I read recently was Nick Mehta's recent book on digital CS. I think it's just called Digital Customer Success. Great book. Highly recommended, especially if you're just getting into it and you're kind of tasked with that project. There it is. Yep. That's it. It's solid. It's a good book. It breaks it down. It also talks about, like, I think what I was initially mentioning earlier about like, hey, TechTouch is, I still like to use the word. I think it's a great word. That's just personal opinion, but he talks about like how it's no longer TechTouch because it was viewed as a segment. I 100% agree with that. I think it's more of a strategy than anything else. And you could
is it the tech that people have problems with, or the touching that people have the problem with?
I think it's because right. Who knows? Oh man, no, but great read. Yeah, but other, I mean, a ton of podcasts, too, like that have been coming up lately, which have been awesome. So, I think you mentioned earlier, like Dylan Young's. I love his podcast, with JP and Rob Zambito.
The daily stand up.
Yeah, good one. Yeah, quick, easy. There's no reason. I mean, me personally, like I get distracted easily on like podcasts. My eyes are totally keeps my attention, but it's quick, so. You really have no excuse, but that's a good one. But yeah, so that's
cool.
That's what I got going on.
Any shout outs you want to give?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, definitely Dylan and the gang. She's actually a digital marketer by trade and then went into digital CS, Marley Wagner. She's been doing some good stuff. She was at, I believe it's called ESG at one point. They were customer success consultancy. It's been keeping an eye on her posts, doing some great work there. And actually another podcast I was listening to recently, Success Unscripted.
Yeah, Sarah's awesome.
Yeah, Sarah Roberts. Good stuff. Yeah, it takes it to that more kind of, I guess, more human approach. That's the best way to describe it.
Yeah. It's shit gets real on that show.
Yeah.
Having been on and having almost cried, I can attest.
Yeah, listen, it's life. That's it.
That's right. No, it's good. Sarah does such a great thing for the community in, because she's not in CS. She leads a recruiting firm that's focused on CS. And so she gets this perspective on the human element of CS that a lot of us who are in the weeds and trying to figure this stuff out don't have. And it's super cool.
No, totally. And I think it's great.
Yeah. Awesome, man. Hey, look, I've thoroughly enjoyed our time together and have enjoyed the various conversations we've had in the past. You need to give Karante some crap and have him reach out to me. But I've really enjoyed having you on the show, and I super appreciate the time.
No, I appreciate the time. It's been great. Thanks for having me. And looking forward to staying in touch. This has been great. Thanks again.
Yeah, cool. Thanks, buddy.
All right. Thanks, Alex. I'll talk to you.
Thank you for joining me for this episode of the Digital CX Podcast. If you like what we're doing, consider leaving us a review on your podcast platform of choice. If you're watching on YouTube, leave a comment down below. It really helps us to grow and provide value to a broader audience. You can view the digital customer success definition word map and get more information about the show and some of the other things that we're doing at digitalcustomersuccess.com. This episode was edited by Lifetime Value Media, a media production company founded by our good mutual friend Dylan Young. Lifetime Value aims to serve the content, video, audio production needs of the CS and post-sale community. They're offering services at a steep discount for a limited time, so navigate to lifetimevaluemedia.com, go have a chat with Dylan, and make sure you mention the Digital CX Podcast sent you. I'm Alex Turkovich. Thanks so much for listening. We'll talk to you next week.